Emma never imagined that by helping a lost dog, she would be stepping into the world of the city's most powerful and feared man. She only wanted to do the right thing. But fate had something else in store. In a place where no one notices the poor, she would be the exception. But does power change everything? Or does it simply reveal who we truly are? The rain poured mercilessly that morning, turning the cracked sidewalks into muddy rivers. Emma clutched her thin coat tighter around her body as she walked down the empty street, her shoes soaked through and the cold biting at her fingers. She had no umbrella, only a plastic bag wrapped around her few groceries and the hope of making it home before the storm worsened. As she turned the corner near the abandoned hardware store, she spotted a shape trembling under the broken awning, a dog, drenched to the bone, its fur matted and slicked down by the rain. It didn't look like a stray. The animal had a sleek build, clean teeth, and wore a collar, though the tag was missing. Its eyes met hers with a strange mix of fear and hope. Emma paused. She had always loved animals, but her life had no room for anything extra. Still, something about the dog's gaze stopped her. She bent down slowly, speaking in a soft tone. "Hey there, buddy. Are you lost?" The dog didn't growl or back away. Instead, it whimpered and inched toward her, as if choosing her. She looked around. The street was empty, the rain relentless. No one else was coming for him. Carefully, she removed her scarf and wrapped it around the dog, shielding him from the wind. He leaned into her touch. "I can't leave you out here," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Carrying the dog home wasn't easy. He was heavier than he looked, and the cold made her movements stiff. But Emma didn't stop. Not when her arms began to ache, not when her groceries spilled into a puddle. Something inside her said she couldn't abandon him. Not this one. Not today. When she finally reached her tiny apartment, a one-bedroom on the edge of town, with peeling paint and a flickering hallway light, she laid the dog on an old towel and wrapped him in a blanket. "You're safe now," she murmured, as he licked her hand weakly. She had no idea where he came from, but she promised herself she'd find out. She made him a small meal from what little she had, rice and chicken scraps. He devoured it like he hadn't eaten in days. Emma smiled for the first time that day. It felt good to be needed, to care for something, someone. Later that night, as she sat by the window watching the rain continue to fall, the dog curled up beside her. His head rested on her lap, and she gently stroked his fur. "You're not just any dog, are you?" she asked softly, not expecting an answer. In that quiet moment, she didn't know that this animal would become the key to a future she never dared to dream of. And far across the city, in a mansion wrapped in shadows and silence, a man realized something precious had gone missing. Emma Carlson had never known luxury. Her world was one of routine struggles, quiet sacrifices, and days that blurred together in a rhythm of survival. She lived alone in a run-down apartment on the edge of Milltown, working long shifts as a cleaner at a local nursing home. Her hands were always cracked from bleach, her back sore from bending, and yet, she smiled at everyone she met. People in her neighborhood knew her, not by wealth or titles, but by kindness. She was the girl who watched her neighbors' kids when they couldn't afford daycare, the one who left food by the door of old Mrs. Lindell downstairs without ever taking credit. She didn't have much, but what she had, she gave. Emma's parents had passed away when she was only 17, leaving her to raise herself. She never went to college, never traveled, never had the time or the money for dreams. Her life was small, quiet, filled with hard work and moments of silent hope. But what she lacked in possessions, she made up for in spirit. She believed in doing what was right, even when no one was watching, especially then. That's why, despite barely scraping by, she didn't think twice about taking in a wet, shivering dog. It was just who she was. The dog, whom she now called Max, brought unexpected light into her small home. In just a few days, the apartment felt less lonely. Emma would talk to him as she made breakfast, laugh when he followed her around, and sometimes cry softly at night when he placed his head gently on her lap, as if saying, "I'm here." But Emma knew she couldn't keep Max forever. He clearly belonged to someone who probably missed him. She checked every telephone pole, every online ad, every vet's office. Nothing. No lost pet flyers, no microchip at the clinic. It was as if he had appeared from nowhere. Still, she didn't give up. Each day before work, she walked the streets asking around, "Has anyone lost a dog? Big tan coat, gentle eyes?" Most shrugged. Some suggested she keep him. Others warned her, "That's a purebred. If he's lost, his owner's rich and probably trouble." Emma didn't care about money. She cared about doing the right thing. At the nursing home, she showed a photo of Max to a sweet old man named Walter, who used to be a private driver for one of the city's elite. His eyes widened when he saw the dog. "That's Blake's dog," he whispered. "Richard Blake. That man could buy this entire city twice over." Emma frowned. "Richard Blake? The businessman?" Walter nodded slowly. "If that's his dog, you better be careful. That man doesn't like to be crossed, and he sure as hell never forgets a face." That night, Emma stared at Max as he slept by her feet, her heart torn. If he really did belong to someone like Richard Blake, what would happen if she returned him? Would he be grateful, or furious that a poor girl from the slums had dared to touch what was his? She didn't know yet, but something told her the moment she returned Max, her life would never be the same again. The days passed slowly, like pages turning in a book Emma never meant to read. The rain had stopped, but the skies remained grey, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Inside her tiny apartment, Max had become more than just a guest. He had become family. Emma began waking up not to the alarm on her old phone, but to the soft nudge of Max's nose. He followed her from room to room, never letting her out of his sight, as though he knew she was all he had. And in truth, she was. But what she hadn't realized was how much she needed him too. At night, when the loneliness crept in, that quiet ache that came with being unseen in a world that only noticed the rich and powerful, Max was there. He would curl up beside her on the couch, listening as she spoke to him like an old friend. Sometimes she told him about her dreams, the ones she used to have as a child. Other times she sat in silence, her hand resting on his fur, her thoughts too heavy for words. One evening, after a particularly long shift at the nursing home, Emma returned home with sore feet and an aching back. The building's elevator had broken down again, so she climbed the stairs slowly, one step at a time. When she opened the door, there he was, Max, tail wagging, eyes bright. He had dragged her slippers to the front door, waiting for her. She smiled through the exhaustion. "You're my little gentleman, aren't you?" She started to imagine what it would be like if he stayed. Just the two of them against the world. Maybe it wasn't realistic, but it made her feel safe, wanted, less invisible. Emma even began to wonder if maybe the owner had forgotten about him, or didn't care, or worse, had abandoned him. She pushed that thought away quickly, not because it didn't make sense, but because it made her chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain. But life has a way of whispering truths when we least expect it. One afternoon, as she walked Max through the neighborhood, a luxury black SUV passed by slowly. Its tinted windows rolled down just enough for someone inside to catch a glimpse of the dog. Then, just as suddenly, the car sped away. Emma felt a chill crawl down her spine. She didn't tell anyone, not yet. But something had shifted. That night, Max was restless. He kept pacing, ears twitching at the smallest sound. Emma sat on the floor beside him, her back against the peeling wallpaper. "Is someone looking for you, boy?" she asked softly. "Or are they trying to stay hidden?" The question hung in the air like fog. In those quiet, uncertain days, Max became Emma's world, her secret, her shadow, her protector. And though she told herself she was only keeping him safe until his real owner showed up, a part of her didn't want that day to come. Not because she wanted to steal something that wasn't hers, but because for the first time in her life, something truly good had found her. And she wasn't ready to let it go. It started with Mrs. Lindell, the elderly woman from the second floor who spent most of her days peering out her window with a pair of binoculars older than time. One morning, as Emma helped Max down the stairs, Mrs. Lindell called out from her doorway, her voice sharp but curious. "That dog's too clean for a girl like you." Emma froze for a second, then forced a polite smile. "He was lost. I found him in the rain." Mrs. Lindell raised an eyebrow. "Looks like a purebred. Expensive kind. You sure someone ain't looking for him?" Word spread faster than Emma could control it. The neighborhood had a way of making small things feel like headlines. Suddenly, shopkeepers asked questions when she walked by. "Hey, Emma, where'd you get that dog? Or you working for someone now?" Or even, "If that dog disappears, don't say we didn't warn you." She tried to shrug it off, but the looks lingered. Too long, too knowing. At the local grocery store, Mr. Vito, who had always been kind to her, pulled her aside. "Listen, Em," he said in a low voice, glancing over his shoulder. "People are talking. That dog, someone saw a poster. Said he belongs to a big man, not the kind you want to mess with." Emma's stomach tightened. "Do you know who?" Vito hesitated. "You didn't hear it from me, but Richard Blake?" "Yeah, that Blake." The name sent a chill through her bones. Richard Blake, the man who owned half the buildings downtown, whose face never showed up in newspapers, but whose influence could be felt in every corner of the city. He wasn't just powerful, he was untouchable. She walked home that day with Max close to her leg, her thoughts racing. Was it true? Could this gentle creature beside her really belong to a man known for lawsuits, silence, and rumors of ruthlessness? That evening, her friend Carla came over, bringing leftover soup and sharp words. "Girl, you need to be careful. If that dog is his, you're not just babysitting a pet. You're holding onto a piece of someone else's empire. Rich people don't like it when their property goes missing." Emma's heart ached at the word property. Max wasn't an object. He had feelings. He had soul. And he wasn't being mistreated here. He was loved, genuinely, quietly. Still, doubt started to settle in. What if someone thought she stole him? What if they came looking for him, not with gratitude, but with lawyers, or worse? That night, unable to sleep, Emma searched the internet again. This time she typed in Richard Blake and missing dog. There it was, a short article buried under financial news and company updates. Reward offered for missing dog of tech mogul Richard Blake. No picture, no contact info. Just a name. Axel. Emma stared at Max. "Axel," she said aloud, testing the sound. His ears perked. He looked straight at her. The truth was becoming harder to deny. And the whispers. They were about to become something much louder. Richard Blake was the kind of man whose name held more weight than his presence ever did. In Milltown, everyone knew of him. The stories, the power, the rumors. But few had actually seen him. He was a ghost wrapped in suits worth more than most people's yearly income, a shadow who moved through the city behind smoked glass and sealed contracts. He owned businesses across industries, tech, real estate, media. If something turned a profit, Blake had a hand in it. His mansion sat on the hill above the city, hidden by iron gates and layers of silence. No reporters ever got in. No scandals ever stuck. He lived like a king without a throne, feared, respected, and entirely alone. They said he had no family, no wife, no children, just staff, security, and silence. Some whispered that his fortune came from deals too dark to print. Others claimed he'd once loved someone deeply, and when she died, he buried his heart with her. No one knew the truth. Richard Blake never explained himself, but those closest to his world, the lawyers, the assistants, the drivers, knew one thing. Richard Blake loved that dog more than any human being. Axel had been his constant companion for 5 years, a gift from someone whose name Richard never mentioned. That dog had seen him through mergers, betrayals, and nights of quiet fury. Axel didn't ask questions, didn't lie, didn't leave. Until one day, he did. It happened during a business trip gone wrong. Richard was called away urgently, and a new staff member was left in charge. The dog got out. By the time they noticed, it was too late. No GPS, no trace. Just gone. Richard didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply fired the entire staff that had been on duty that day. No exceptions. Then he quietly offered a large reward, but only through private channels. He didn't want publicity. He didn't want charity. He just wanted his dog back. And yet, week after week, Axel didn't return. Richard's house grew quieter. He cancelled meetings, spent hours staring out the window. The people around him noticed. Something was unraveling. So when his security team brought him a blurry photo taken by a surveillance drone, a girl walking a dog through a poor neighborhood on the east side, Richard didn't say a word. He just stared at the image. It wasn't clear, but it was enough. He leaned forward, tapped the image and said, "Find her." Quietly. Richard Blake didn't chase people. But this time, something told him he'd already lost too much, and he wasn't about to lose again. It was a Thursday afternoon when the silence outside Emma's apartment turned heavy, the kind of silence that doesn't belong in the city. The streets were still. The usual hum of neighbors arguing, kids playing, dogs barking. It was all gone, replaced by the low hum of a black SUV engine purring outside her building. Emma noticed it right away. She wasn't used to seeing cars like that around here. Sleek, polished, out of place. The kind of car that didn't just pass through, it watched. She peeked through the torn curtain, her heart skipping a beat. 2 men stepped out. Both in dark suits, clean-shaven, their movements precise. They weren't cops. They weren't from the neighborhood, and they weren't here for groceries. Max, or Axel, suddenly stood up, tense. He walked to the door, his ears alert. A low growl rose in his throat. Emma whispered, "Shh, boy." But he didn't relax. A knock. Firm. 2 raps, spaced evenly. Not rushed, not hesitant, like they already knew who lived there. Emma froze. Then, carefully, she cracked the door open. The taller man, with piercing eyes and a neutral expression, gave a nod. "Miss Carlson?" Her name coming out of a stranger's mouth was enough to make her chest tighten. "Yes? We're here on behalf of Mr. Richard Blake. He believes you may have something that belongs to him." Emma's breath caught. So it was true. The whispers, the stares, the warnings. It was all real. Her knees wobbled, but she stood her ground. "I found a dog. I was trying to find the owner." The man didn't smile. "We're aware. May we come in?" Emma hesitated. Something about them didn't feel dangerous. But they didn't feel safe either. She stepped aside, heart pounding, as Max positioned himself between her and the men. Inside, they scanned the room quickly, eyes trained. The second man pulled out a photo and showed it to her. The dog in the picture was unmistakably Max. Only in the image, he was clean, proud, and sitting beside a man whose face was half turned away. "Mr. Blake has been searching for this animal for weeks," the man said. "He would like to retrieve him personally." Emma blinked. "Personally?" "Yes. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. He'll send a car for you and the dog. Dress appropriately." She opened her mouth to ask what that meant, but they were already turning toward the door. The taller man stopped and looked back. "You've taken care of him. Mr. Blake appreciates that." Then, without another word, they were gone. Emma stood frozen, her thoughts spinning. Max came to her, nuzzled her hand, sensing her fear. That night, she barely slept. She paced, she cried. She stared at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man sends men in suits instead of thank you notes. And still, part of her hoped, just a small part, that meeting this mysterious Mr. Blake wouldn't be the end of something, but the beginning. Morning came wrapped in fog, the kind that turned the world into a blur. Emma hadn't slept a minute. She sat at the edge of her bed, watching Max sleep curled by the door, unaware of how different life might look in just a few hours. 10 o'clock was approaching fast, and her heart raced with every passing second. What would she say? What would he say? She had rehearsed dozens of scenarios in her mind, each one less believable than the last. Would Richard Blake accuse her? Thank her? Offer her money? Or worse, pretend she never existed? She opened the small closet in her bedroom, scanning the few clothes she owned. Nothing looked appropriate, as the suited man had requested. She settled on a simple blue dress, old but clean, and brushed her hair back with trembling hands. She didn't own makeup. She didn't need it. She wanted to be seen as she was. Nothing more, nothing less. At exactly 10:01, the car arrived. Not just any car. A black town car, long and elegant, with a driver in a hat and white gloves. He stepped out, opened the back door without a word, and gestured for her to enter. She hesitated, then clipped Max's leash and whispered, "Ready, boy." Max didn't resist. He climbed in with calm confidence, as if he recognized the scent of something familiar. Emma followed, her heart pounding so loud it felt like thunder in her chest. The ride through the city felt surreal. She watched the streets shift from cracked sidewalks to marble storefronts. The buildings grew taller, the spaces quieter. She had never been this far uptown, never crossed into the world of men like Richard Blake. Finally, the car turned onto a private road lined with trees that looked too perfectly planted to be real. At the end of it stood the mansion, massive pale stone, cold as a museum. The driver didn't speak. He simply opened the door, nodded, and disappeared. Emma stepped out, gripping Max's leash. The front doors opened before she could knock. A butler, yes, a real butler, greeted her with a bow. "Mr. Blake is waiting in the atrium. Please follow me." She walked through rooms that smelled like polished wood and power. Walls lined with books, floors that didn't creak, silence so thick it echoed. And then she saw him, standing by a tall window, hands behind his back, dressed in a black tailored suit. Richard Blake turned slowly, his gaze steady and unreadable. He looked nothing like the monsters people described. His face was sharp, striking, but it was his eyes that caught her, cold, calculating, and oddly sad. "Miss Carlson," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Thank you for coming." Emma's throat tightened. "I didn't know he was yours at first. I swear I was just trying to help." Richard raised a hand, silencing her gently. "You did help, more than you know." Max walked forward, tail wagging slightly, approaching Richard with hesitation. When their eyes met, something shifted in the air. Recognition, yes, but also hesitation. As if Max was trying to decide whether this man still felt like home. Richard knelt slowly and placed a hand on Max's head. "Good boy," he whispered. His voice cracked just slightly. "You made it back." Emma stood quietly, unsure of what came next. Then Richard stood, facing her fully. "Tell me, Miss Carlson, what would it take for you to stay?" Her heart stopped. "Excuse me," she said, barely able to form the words. "I don't want to simply take him from you," he said. "I want to offer you something, a proposal, one that could change everything." In that moment, Emma realized this wasn't just about a dog anymore. It was about fate, about timing, and about a decision she never expected to make. Emma had never been in a room so beautiful, yet so cold. The atrium of Richard Blake's mansion was made of glass and marble, filled with the kind of silence that could swallow a person whole. She stood there, feeling like an intruder in a place built for people born with power. Richard Blake, the man who commanded boardrooms with a glance, now stood a few feet from her. His expression unreadable, his posture perfect. The weight of his presence was undeniable, not loud, but suffocating in its quiet intensity. Emma's hands trembled slightly at her sides. "You said you had a proposal." He studied her for a moment, then gestured for her to sit. She didn't move. "I'd rather stand." A flicker of amusement crossed his face, then vanished. "Very well," he said. "I've spent weeks searching for him. Axel. He was a gift. From someone I lost. And when he disappeared, it felt like losing her all over again." His voice didn't waver, but there was pain behind it, the kind that time doesn't heal. Emma softened. "I didn't mean to keep him. I was just trying to help." "You did more than help," he replied. "You cared, genuinely. I've watched the footage, the way you walked with him, spoke to him, slept beside him on that worn-out couch of yours. You made him feel safe again." Emma blinked. "You watched me. I had to be sure," he said calmly. "In my world, trust is rare. And when I saw how you treated him, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time." She crossed her arms. "So what is this? A thank you visit? A test? Are you here to offer me a check and send me on my way?" Richard's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something deeper. "No, I want to offer you a job, a position in my house. Axel has bonded with you. He's different since being with you. I don't want to take him from you. I want you to stay here, as his caretaker." Emma stared at him. "You want me to live here?" "Yes. And do what? Walk your dog?" "And be safe," he said more softly than she expected. "No more scraping by, no more wondering how to pay rent or if the power will be cut. I can offer you stability, comfort, and in return, Axel keeps the one person who makes him calm." Emma wanted to laugh, not out of mockery but disbelief. It sounded like something out of a dream or a trap. "I don't belong here," she whispered. "I clean toilets for a living. I eat canned soup for dinner. You don't know what it's like to be invisible." Richard stepped forward, just enough to close the distance between them. "Don't assume you know what I've never been through." She met his gaze, and in that moment something shifted. For the first time, she didn't see a titan of industry. She saw a man, alone, lost, just like she had been. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Richard said, "You don't have to decide today. But know this. When the world takes everything from you, kindness becomes a currency more valuable than gold. You gave it freely. Let me return the favor." Emma looked down at Max, who wagged his tail, torn between the two people he now loved. And for the first time since she found him, she wondered. Maybe the dog hadn't been the one who was lost. Maybe she had been. Richard Blake had spent his life mastering control. Of people, of power, of silence. But nothing had prepared him for the way Emma looked at him. Not with fear, not with awe, not even with admiration. But with raw, human truth. She didn't need him. That much was clear. She had survived storms without his wealth, without his protection. And yet, there was something in her eyes that unsettled him. A mirror of everything he had lost, and everything he never thought he'd find again. Emma didn't trust easily, and Richard respected that. He watched her move through the mansion like someone walking on thin ice. She didn't touch anything she didn't need to. She asked permission before petting Axel. She never once tried to impress him. She simply existed, authentically. And somehow, that was the most powerful thing Richard had seen in years. Over the next few days, she stayed, not because she agreed to anything, but because Max, Axel, refused to sleep anywhere but at her feet. She moved into the guest house at the back of the estate, a modest space with large windows and a fireplace she didn't know how to light. A housekeeper showed her how, and Emma thanked her with the kind of warmth that made even the coldest hearts feel human. Richard watched from a distance. Every day, he told himself, he was doing this for the dog. But by the third evening, as he stood outside her window, seeing her read a book while Axel rested on her lap, he knew better. He wasn't just watching her. He was remembering what it felt like to be seen. Emma didn't ask him about his money. She didn't pry into his business. But one night, as they sat in the garden, a rare, quiet dinner shared over soup and fresh bread, she asked, "Why do you live like this? Alone?" Richard stared at the sky for a long moment before answering. "Because when you have everything, you forget how to need anyone." Emma didn't respond. She just nodded, as if understanding without judgment. And that was what broke him. He started talking, not in full stories, but in pieces. A sister he lost young. A betrayal from someone he once loved. The walls he built to keep the world out, until even joy couldn't get in. Emma listened, never interrupting, never filling the silence. She let his words breathe, and as she listened, he saw something in her eyes no one else had ever shown him. Not pity, not admiration, but recognition. She knew what it was like to be invisible, to be overlooked, to love without expecting anything in return. That night, after she returned to the guest house, Richard stood in the garden long after the stars appeared. He had all the power in the world, but for the first time he wanted something he couldn't buy, and her name was Emma. The morning came dressed in golden light, filtering through the sheer curtains of the guest house. Emma sat at the small wooden table, stirring her coffee in silence, her thoughts louder than ever. The last few days had been unreal, too quiet, too comfortable, and maybe too dangerous. She hadn't agreed to anything officially, but Richard's staff treated her like a fixture. Meals delivered, the guest house cleaned. A wardrobe appeared overnight, all in her size, all elegant, modest, simple. She hadn't asked for any of it, and that made her nervous. She had grown up in a world where nothing came without a price. That morning, a note arrived with breakfast. "Join me in the study at noon." When the clock struck 12, Emma walked across the courtyard, Max trotting beside her. Her hands were clenched into fists, hidden inside her coat. She was preparing herself. For what? She wasn't sure. The study was vast and masculine, with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a fire crackling in the hearth. Richard stood near the window, once again lost in thought. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. "Thank you for coming," he said. Emma nodded once. "I assume this is more than a lunch invite." He smiled faintly. "It is." He walked toward a desk and pulled out a file. "This is a contract. It outlines a formal position, animal caretaker with housing and full salary, benefits, security." Emma didn't touch the folder. "Why me?" Richard's eyes locked with hers. "Because you're the only person he trusts. And I don't trust many people either." She hesitated. "And what's the unspoken part of the deal?" Richard's jaw tensed. "You'll be protected, watched over, respected. But yes, your life will change. This place, it isn't the real world. It's mine." Emma looked down. "And what happens if I say no?" "Then you walk away, with my thanks, no strings." She studied him. "Do you always offer strangers a life like this?" He laughed, not harshly, but with something like regret. No, I never offer anything. But you're not just anyone. And this isn't just about a dog anymore. There it was, the shift she had felt but hadn't wanted to name. Something between them had changed. Unspoken, powerful, dangerous. Emma walked to the fireplace, stared into the flames. I've spent my life cleaning after people who don't even see me. I've eaten expired food and worn secondhand shoes. And now you're offering me all of this. It feels like a dream or a trap. Richard stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. It's neither. It's a choice. She turned to face him. Then let me ask you something. He nodded. If I take this offer, will I still be free? To leave when I want? To live without owing you everything? Richard didn't hesitate. Yes, no strings, no chains, just one condition. She braced herself. Which is? You be honest. With me, with yourself. The words hit harder than she expected. Emma didn't say yes. Not yet. But she didn't walk out either. She stayed. And somewhere deep in her chest, a quiet part of her began to hope. Maybe this wasn't a deal with the devil. Maybe it was the first real blessing she'd ever been given. The days in the estate began to feel strangely familiar, like pages from someone else's life. Emma had accepted the offer, not with excitement, but with cautious hope. She still kept her old apartment. Richard insisted on paying the rent, just in case. But she hadn't stepped foot in it since. Axel, was thriving. Healthier, more playful, even more protective of her now than before. He never let her out of his sight. And Richard? He was still a mystery. Present, respectful, distant, yet drawn to her in quiet, unspoken ways. One evening, while organizing a box of books in the study, Emma stumbled upon something she wasn't meant to find. A photograph. Old, slightly faded. A woman with kind eyes, soft features, and a gentle smile. She looked familiar, not in face, but in essence, like someone Emma had once known. She set it aside, but before she could ask Richard about it, his voice came from behind her. You found her? Emma turned quickly, startled. I didn't mean to. It's all right, he said, walking over slowly. He picked up the photo and stared at it for a long time. Her name was Lillian. She was the only person who ever saw me the way you do. Emma didn't speak. She felt it, the weight in his voice, the grief that hadn't aged. She died 4 years ago. Cancer, fast, unfair, he said softly. Axel was hers, really. I just kept him after. Emma's heart sank. I'm sorry. Richard nodded, still staring at the photo. You remind me of her, not in how you look, in how you care, the way you don't ask for anything but give everything. It was the most vulnerable thing he had ever said to her. And it wasn't the last. Because that night, as the fire crackled and Axel lay between them, Richard handed Emma another envelope. Thicker, older, worn at the edges. She opened it slowly, unsure of what she was about to read. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, signed, Lillian Blake. The name stopped her cold. Emma looked up. She was your wife? Richard shook his head. My sister. Emma blinked. But then, she lived in a small town after she married, he said. Left everything behind. We lost touch for years. After she passed, I looked through her things, found letters and records. She had a child. Emma's stomach turned. Her hands trembled. My sister's daughter, he said. Adopted after the accident. Raised under another name. Emma. I believe that's you. Silence. Time stopped. The letter fell from her hands, landing on the floor between them. Emma stared at Richard, unable to breathe. You think I'm my niece, he finished quietly. It's why I kept watching. Why I didn't stop thinking about you. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then I saw your birth certificate, the dates, the foster system, the missing links, and I knew. Tears welled in her eyes. You should have told me. I didn't know how, he said, voice raw. I thought if I told you too soon, you'd run. Emma looked down at Axel, who lifted his head, sensing the tension. I don't know what this means, she whispered. It means, Richard said slowly, that you're not alone. Not anymore. And everything I've built, one day, it could be yours, if you want it. The weight of it crushed her. Not the money. The truth. For years, she had walked this world believing she had no one. And now, sitting in a mansion with a man once feared, now familiar, she realized she had found family, not in blood alone, but in the heart. The mansion no longer felt like a stranger's house. The walls, once cold and imposing, now held warmth, laughter and stories Emma never thought seriam della. Days turned into weeks, and slowly her life shifted, not because of money or comfort, but because of meaning. Emma didn't become someone else. She remained the same girl who picked up groceries in plastic bags, who left extra food on neighbors' porches, who talked to a dog like he was a person. But now, for the first time, someone saw her for that, and didn't look away. Richard had changed too. The man who once built walls around his heart now shared breakfast on the terrace with her, told childhood stories, and even laughed. Real, full laughter, the kind she never imagined could come from a man like him. But the true glue that bound them was Axel. He was everywhere, chasing squirrels in the garden, resting his head on Emma's lap while she read, curling up at Richard's feet during quiet evenings. It was as if he knew the truth before either of them did, that he hadn't been lost. He had been sent. One quiet morning, Emma returned to her old apartment for the last time. It was small, dark, and filled with ghosts. She stood in the doorway looking at the stains on the carpet, the creaky window she used to stare out of, wondering if life would ever change. She smiled softly. Thank you, she whispered to the walls, and closed the door behind her for good. Back at the estate, Richard waited on the front steps, coffee in hand, Axel by his side. When she walked up the path, he stood. You came back, he said. I wasn't sure I would, she replied. But I realized something. For years, I thought I had nothing. No roots, no reason to believe life could be more than survival. But I was wrong. He looked at her, searching. Emma took a breath. I have a name, a family, a future, and I'm not afraid anymore. He stepped forward, unsure. So what do you want, Emma? She smiled, not the shy, hesitant smile of a girl unsure of her place in the world, but the quiet, powerful smile of a woman who knew exactly who she was. I want to stay, not because of the money, not even because of Axel. She looked at him. But because, somehow, in the middle of a storm, I found home. Richard didn't speak. He just nodded, eyes misted, chest rising slowly. He reached out, gently taking her hand. The past had shaped them both. But it didn't define them. The girl who once had nothing gave everything without asking, and the man who had everything learned how to give in return. And the dog. He brought them together, not by accident, but by a destiny far greater than either could have imagined. Sometimes it takes getting lost to finally be found. Emma didn't go looking for riches, nor did she seek recognition. All she did was follow her heart, and that small act of kindness changed everything. What would you have done in Emma's place? Would you return a lost dog, if it meant giving up the one true companion you ever had? Have you ever been surprised by life when you least expected it? Tell us in the comments. We read every story, and yours might inspire our next video. And if this story touched your heart even a little, consider showing your support with a super thanks. Every financial contribution helps our channel reach more people, and tell more powerful stories like this one. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional journey like this one. And hey, click the video on your screen right now to watch another heartwarming story. You don't want to miss what happens next.